Howdy folks, happy Friday. What is going on? It's Friday, it's Paintover Day. Welcome. I hope everyone's had a good week. I hope their Fridays have been a good one. If it's late where you are, or it's off to a good start if it's early where you are. Cheers to everybody. Cheers. Luca, Sarkot, good to see you both. Thank you for being here. In the drinking game called Wartime Optimism, the music's already going, so you guys, everyone, time for a drink. So we have, I only got the 3 today. I'm not gonna lie, work kicked my ass a little bit this week, and I kind of had to rush on these just a bit. So we might do a little bit of painting as we're looking over some things. Jaime, if you're in the audience, I still have your image. I'm gonna get to it first next week. But today we have 3, and 2 time lapses, because I'm not gonna say that there was a user error with OBS, but someone may or may not have forgotten to hit record. Just saying. You guys can guess who that might have been. Okay. So, let's see. I got a warning from YouTube. I don't know if that matters or not. I'm guessing you guys can hear me, because you seem to be responding. Alessia? I think I might have gotten that one right. Good to see you. Very nice. Vlad, what's going on, buddy? Milan, howdy. Oh, we forgot we're on the wrong little cam. Yeah, well, it's been a discombobulating week a little bit, but, let's see here. There it is. Official. But we're not even trying to stay there. We're trying to get to Photoshop. Okay. Alrighty, I think you guys can see the screen. This first one is from the Mac competition a while ago from Fabio. And this one is from Leandro Michelina, I'm going to go with. I feel like I did all right on that one. So this one, I don't have a time lapse for the little bit of painting that I did. On all of these, I spent 15-ish, 20 minutes just kind of quickly trying to sketch out some ideas. But this one, yeah. If you haven't guessed by now, I forgot to press record, so we don't have a video. But that is okay, because we still have the Photoshop file. Alright. I feel like I've had too many meetings this week, and that much scheduling just makes my brain fried. Okay, so let's close some things here and have a look at Leandro. So we have a astronaut hazmat suity guy. The white kind of makes him feel like an astronaut to me. And we obviously have floating rocks, and we have this hard line. So the first thing that really jumped out at me with this one, it was we have this really hard line in the background that intersects right at the head. So the camera's right at the eye level of this astronaut. And it draws a lot of attention, and it draws a lot of attention if you kind of glance at this guy. That's what you read, not the astronaut or the computer, which is what we want the kind of setting to be a backdrop, right? So at first I was like, I wonder if I can make this work, and I just quickly took that away, and you can see how and I made him black because we have a light coming from behind him, but no real reason for a light. So that's my first thought was okay, let's take a look at this. And this, I think, very quickly focuses in the viewer on what we're supposed to be looking at. But I also think that we have to move the camera for this one. Having a hard horizontal line right in the middle of the camera can be tough. Having the horizon there, it just makes things look a little bit. It cuts the image in half, and if you're not trying to do that for a very specific reason, it can be a bit distracting. So I went and I did some thumbnails, obviously very quick thumbnails, just to kind of quickly investigate what would happen if we move that kind of bright line, move the camera down so that bright horizon line moved way down to the feet. And it was poorly drawn here, but I kind of liked that idea. This idea I gave up on very quickly. Not entirely sure. Oh yeah, this one I was thinking about moving the horizon up, which for this kind of pulled back camera didn't make much sense as I started kind of quickly sketching on it. And then this is kind of a more POV type of camera, so we have a high horizon line, so we're kind of looking down on the character and the computer and more from the back, which even though technically, again, we've done this in the past, he gets bigger there. as far as how much frame he's taking, his importance gets less because we're meant to see over him and past him. So that's kind of the thought there. I tried painting in color. I'm still not comfortable enough painting in color. We're gonna see here in a second. I feel like I should have just kept the black and white for this one, especially because these are more like compositional issues that I think that we need to deal with than anything else. So bear with me, this is really sketchy. But here's the first one. You can see that the horizon's way darkened down. It's still there, but it's not important, right? It's just kind of setting the scene for this. We have dude taking up most of the frame and kind of looking, you're a little bit more behind him, and then at this beautifully drawn computer. And I think that this is my favorite. It's a little bit more, it's somewhere between like a video game and like a more cinematic kind of framing, I think, of the original idea. But it does change it quite a bit. And so better or worse, it's just one idea. The second idea I came up with was basically taking this composition, still kind of playing with scale a little bit. In the original one, everything's kind of on the same plane. And I feel like a little bit more separation in depth, which is going to mean a scalar difference visually, will lead someone into this image more. So this was my second idea. Obviously very poorly drawn. I apologize for that, Leandro. But hopefully the idea is there. And the idea is now your camera is down around hip length so that you don't have this kind of like bright-ish, and I think this is too bright here, but you don't have this like brightish line intersecting with the headlamps kind of volumetric light. So that was the rough idea with that one. And then next we have, this is kind of somewhere in between the two. It's probably the worst drawn one. I mean, really we're fighting for last place on that front. But same idea basically as the one before it, only again like shifting the camera such that we have more of a depth between where the guy is and then the camera's further, or the computer's further back. And again, very subdued horizon, right? If the image is, I didn't do any where the image was just about the horizon, but I don't feel like the background is as prevalent or as worked out as it would need to be if the subject was the space itself. If the subject was this like big kind of, I'm thinking that these are reflections. I'm not entirely sure of the bottom. But if this was about the space as a whole, we would need kind of some more design elements in it. And in which case I would probably make the person and the computer much smaller, and then obviously design the space that it's in. And then the last one is kind of, I was getting frustrated with my inability to paint uber fastly. And so I just did like a quick couple of minutes back in black and white of, this is how I would start probably, I think, framing this image to get this idea across, but to make more sense. So the horizon's back up, but we still have some clear separation between the headlamp and the horizon itself. I just kind of quickly put in columns here, which would make sense if wherever this is placed used to have gravity. But some type of architectural repeating element will help give the space definition and legibility as far as how big and open it is. And then I like the idea of maybe having some of these cables go up to the top. There's an amazing, is it by Joker Martini? No, it's built in, I don't know if you're working in 3ds Max, Leandro. They have spline overlap now, so that if you have like two splines that run across each other, it'll naturally make them kind of sit on top of one another, which I think would add a lot of life to what's happening down here. But again, if you're going to use these, I would have them, right now they're just kind of all randomly placed. I would have them more designed, I guess, right? In the same way that you can use clouds to help shape a composition, we do have some that are kind of coming to the computer, but they also run right past it. I think that if it was me, if I was going to keep all of these cables on the ground, I'd want to organize them a little bit more, only so that like their purpose and their visual impact helps as opposed to just providing visual noise. And I would do the same with the floating rocks, which I just basically ignored in all of my painting. So yeah, that was kind of my 15-minute take on that one. I think we have an issue because I got a little red box down here. Let's see if it comes back. Anybody in the chat, if you can still hear me ask this question, let me know, because I have zero clue. Oh wait, it's back to green. I think we're okay. So Leandro, those are my kind of quick 10-15 minute thoughts on this one. I love the idea. I love the kind of vibe that you have going on. I think that we just need to start controlling some things to really get that to read and be a little bit more legible as to what you're trying to communicate compositionally. Yeah, so Leandro, thank you for submitting this, and I hope that was, I know those drawings are all pretty bad, but you know, we're working with what I got here. Idea wise, I think I like this. I might move the horizon down just a little bit. Hard to say, but these are also ideas that you could easily test in 3D, right? Because you're just quickly moving the camera and keeping an eye on the frame buffer. So yeah, thank you very much for submitting an image. Hope that was helpful. On to the next that we do have a video for, which is Adam Tubak's also Mac entry from a couple of weeks ago. Really like the soft tones. I feel like there's kind of a playful nature to it. Like most of the images in this competition that made the computer huge did it in kind of like an authoritarian, like kind of 1984 kind of feel to it, and this feels playful, which I really liked. I think a lot of that's the color. My biggest kind of thought when I looked at it is that it's very hard to read the depth. Originally I thought these were buildings further back in the background until I realized the cables made them out. I think that the overall like kind of value range of this image is pretty limited, right? We're kind of all stuck in these like the high side of the mid-tone range, and I think as a result it read just a little bit flat to me. So I'll show you what I ended up painting, which was something like this, where sloppily done, but pulling the foreground elements closer to us and pushing the background further away. This, with all the trees and everything, it was kind of a hard one to paint over without, no excuses. I could have done better. But hopefully like that difference reads to you. Let's cue up the video of how I got to this. I didn't really mess with the composition at all on these ones. I think in the future, for anyone who wants to submit an image, which if you do, thank you, I appreciate it. Maybe a couple words in the email of what you are focusing on trying to improve. So I didn't move anything in this. I just kind of adjusted values and colors. I think there's a chance I would have adjusted some of the compositional stuff if I was thinking more about where things are placed. But I kind of like the computer in the middle. I don't know. I'm a little scatterbrained today, folks. But a couple words in the email if you send it to me, and if you do want to send one, mike@droki.com. Just a couple notes of like, I feel like I'm working on composition or lighting or post-production or whatever it might be. And then that way I can kind of think about it in that frame, because you kind of have to make a decision at the beginning of these paintovers, at least I do, of here's the number one thing that I think I would adjust. And for me in this one, it was, what's-it-called? Kind of the depth in the existing composition. Okay. So we got to switch screens, because that's still Photoshop. The fact that the video is also Photoshop, I can see why I messed up yesterday. But, okay. Mouse check, yeah, okay, we got the right one now. And it's in the right window in OBS. Yeah, I think this is the first time I've ever used this new little content-aware select tool. It didn't do a bad job, I gotta say. I'm kind of impressed by it. Way to go, Adobe. So yeah, you know, there's a decent amount of kind of implied atmosphere in this image. It's not like obviously a foggy day, but there is a decent amount of atmospheric perspective in it. And so I'm effectively what I'm doing here at the beginning is I'm removing it from the things that are close to the camera, because obviously atmospheric perspective builds up with distance. So these kind of like very lightened and washed out blacks throughout the image, like the shadows and the trees in the distance are very, very light, would not affect things in the foreground. And so that's kind of what I'm, the first thing. And I think just pulling the characters here towards the camera gives the computer a whole bunch of space to breathe, kind of visually for a viewer. And so now just kind of making a very rough selection so that, again, this is kind of tough with all of the trees, but trying to isolate those three main buildings a bit more from the background so that they stand out from the trees in the way that I believe they were intended to, from the composition. Oh, Claudio, good to see you. Michaela, hello, hello. Daniel, don't know if I said hello or not to you. Hello. Javier, awesome. And Vlad, it's okay if there's enough contrast. I'm not sure what you said that in relation to. I would love a clarification. But yeah, so the idea that I'm kind of going for with this is I want to add more like depth into the image. I don't want to make it darker. I want the end result to hopefully have a similar feel to the first one as far as being quite like light and airy, but just with a little bit more space for the viewer to kind of enter the image visually was the goal and hope on this one. And so I kind of I mess around with some brushes I've never used before that have been sitting in my brush palette for forever. And they help at least to make it not too overpainted, I guess you could say. Oh, gotcha. If you've been using it a lot, have you been using the Content Aware Select a lot in your work, or just kind of each now and again? It's the first time I used it, and I was kind of impressed because there was a decent amount of like detail around it, and it did kind of pretty okay. At least for the speed that it did. So I didn't think it would do that well with this one, but it did. I'm going to play with it more, I think, in the future. But yeah, so what are we doing now? So painting back some of those trees so that it doesn't feel quite as washed out. And I'm not sure what else. Well, I changed some color stuff. I think right now we have the light kind of coming from the back right of the camera, and I think if I was doing this, I think there's a chance I would move it off to the left or actually backlight this. Right, backlight with like a decent amount of haze gives you like a very soft, like kind of ambient light. Moving it off to the left would add a little bit more light to the front side of the computer as opposed to the side that we see, which I think would be nice, but would probably end up adding overall contrast to it. So I think at some point I paint in the left side of those images, the left side of those buildings, to kind of like get a quick look at whether or not that's worth pursuing. And I basically just got stuck in the fact that it looks really bad from how I did it. But relighting a scene completely in post, or moving a sun as opposed to just softening things, or anything else. Oh yeah, so right here is what I'm trying that idea here. And I was kind of like, I can't tell if it's just me not doing a good job of making these changes or if it's just not a good idea. But just a thought that I had. But yeah, relighting, as far as actually like moving the direction of the sun, tends to be a slow process, I think. Yeah, and I delete that. Totally agree, Vlad. At least like for quick stuff, right? Like quick stuff or easy stuff, anything that can like speed up one of those tedious processes, or at least speed it up, if not complete it altogether, but at least speed it up, is awesome. So just trying to make this read a little bit more accurately, and then I kind of was like, oh, what kind of other weird brushes are sitting in? I think that's the set from it's either from Evenit or from Emod. I'm not entirely sure. I've not played with all of them. But that way it looks like there's something there as opposed to just a brush stroke. And I think all I do here is I make a couple other little color changes and I brighten up the characters just a smidge. Because right now it's starting to feel like those blacks have gotten quite black, and that was not my intention. So paint back in just a little bit of color, or at least the suggestion of color, and then I do some leveling to this guy. But we're just about done this one. I quite like the story in this. I'm not sure what looks like one of those parking dividers. It looks like one of those parking dividers that you would see like on the highway. But I like that it's floating. I kind of like that it looks like that. It looks like these two, they're not stormtroopers, but we'll just call them stormtroopers, are having a good time. Frolicking in the snow for whatever reason with the Mac here. I like it. Let's see. Do I do anything else? I don't know. Oh yeah, so I'm still lightening things. I felt like I got a little bit heavy on the blacks for this, which I do think gives depth, but not always in the best way. Oh yeah, and then this is kind of a big change, and it's sloppy because there's all those little branches that I didn't want to deal with trying to select around, or using channels to isolate. But lightening up the sky, right? Like if the idea is, from here to the end of this little yard forest thing, there's a decent amount of atmosphere, then the sky can only be so dark because you're still looking through that atmosphere. And so that was done pretty sloppily, but I think even in the original, the sky reads darker than it should given the overall lighting of the whole scene. So yeah. We done? I think we're done. Yeah. So Adam, awesome job. I really like this image. I hope that there was something of value in that. Oops, what's going on? There we go. So that's where we started, and that's where we ended. And I think at least reads with more depth, which was my goal for this one, without hopefully changing the overall feel too much. These guys got a lot more like color painted into them so that they stand out more without just being black, was kind of the idea there. These probably still got a bit too heavy. We can probably just lift the blacks all together. Yeah, kinda. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. But yeah, Adam, awesome job. Thank you for submitting an image, and I hope that there was something helpful in that one. I enjoyed the challenge of trying to paint into this. With varying levels of success, we'll say. But that was a fun one. Thank you. Okay, and then moving right along to our third and final one of the day. Jorge Martinez, this was his submission for the Star Wars competition from Fabio also last time. And really liked this one. I like the story in this, the idea that BB-8 is here to save the world from this virus, and we kind of got the fully suited up, I'm assuming doctor, coming to accept the prize, as it were. And then the cool background, and I also like you submitted this sketch, which I think is really nice as well. That hopefully came before it as like trying to get the composition out. One thing I would suggest when you're doing these sketches, for me, when I'm sketching composition, I never like do this much detail. The reason being is that if I wanted to grab this dude and move him, it would mess up all of the other things that I drew. And so like the one thing that I wanted to do in this image was I adjusted the composition a bit, and I played with it a couple different ways, but bring a little bit more life into the background, right? We have a warm light coming down on these guys, and then even like the red is like a cool red, and these windows are just kind of like a lighter version of this green that's kind of saturating the whole image. And so my thought was like, let's give a little bit more like life to the inside. I think this foreground is kind of hurting. And then one other thing that I tried, so this is my first take on a paint over of this guy, which we have some, volumetric light coming in to kind of like really say, hey, here's the focus of the image. These guys all get brighter, obviously in a pretty sloppy way. And then I tried a couple other things. One, I tried moving them like this. And at some point we're going to see, I also tried flipping him. Because he's tall and he's the kind of this vertical block, even though we have like all this room, it still feels like the image, I'm doing that thing again where I'm pointing to my screen and you guys can't see it. We have that thing where like the image kind of stops here. Like it's very hard to get across him, right? Because he's kind of in the middle stopping it. So at one point I flipped them, and then that bothered me because it didn't make sense that the doctor would be on the left because the hospital's on the right. And then I ended up doing something like this, which I really liked having the ambulance and stuff in there, so you could just recompose things. I think I actually did do a quick, kind of sketch of that idea. And then you have all this kind of just like empty space that lets the composition really like rest on BB-8, who's kind of like our hero of our little story. Oh, like me as well. I'm a huge fan of this one. So I don't know that this was the best compositional answer to that problem. And I think I probably... Let's do, before we watch the time lapse, I want to do a quick little test here. What happens if we take this... Yep, horizontal. And then let's just quickly draw out the hard lines so that they're not distracting us. Kind of soften that up. Narrative wise, that doesn't work. But compositionally, I feel like it's a bit nicer. But then you'd kind of have to rework the idea for me for the narrative to work. Either way, so that was the first thought. This was the first thing I actually painted. And then this was kind of the next one. And so we do have a video for this guy, I do believe. Let us see here. And we got to switch it. We'll try to be mindful of that this time. All right, mouse check. Okay. So yeah, so again, I did like 20 minutes or so of painting on this one. And I tried to keep the colors kind of accurate to where they started from. Because even though this is a compositional exercise, it's more kind of compositional tweaking. And I feel like the mood that just started in this image is great. I just feel like the city felt a little bit too dead. Now you can argue, I think, from a narrative standpoint, that it should feel not great yet because they're just getting the cure. So you could completely disagree with me, but I felt like bringing a little bit more life into the background brought the image, made the background important enough to justify this kind of like somewhat sparse composition. And I really like this kind of two foreground elements, very strong in the foreground, and then this kind of layered background of obviously the hospital on the right and then more apartment buildings on the left. But just trying to kind of bring them out. I felt like they got lost, a little bit too lost in the kind of greenish haze. But yeah, this is totally nitpicking. I think it was a great entry. I really, really like it. Claudio, like something like that would be pretty easy, right? Like you could make a gate of like, that's where you cross. You could even use like, I mean, having towards the end, I draw in like the suggestion of a streetlight on the far left. You could even have like a crosswalk sign there of some sort. That suggests like that would be the way that you'd walk, and then it would make visual sense. I feel like having at least a hint of it would help. Absolutely. And there's probably a bunch of solutions. There's one thing that I don't bother painting because it's not like a big compositional thing, but you can see it right here on the screen. See how the top of the fence lines up almost exactly with that row of windows coming across the hospital. I probably just shifting the camera up a little bit or down a little bit wouldn't change the composition as a whole, but you would not have that tangency going across. And those are just like little details that affect legibility. Not so much composition, but legibility. But obviously I'm just saying that now. I didn't actually bother to actually paint it because it's a relatively minor thing. But as long as I noticed it, figured might as well mention it. But yeah, Jorge, great work on this. I really like this one. Really like this one. And I think that it's, I like that it takes the composition takes a very strong stance. In some degree, I'm almost backing that up a little bit, and giving it like a stronger second and third read. But I like that the composition says this is about, BB-8 handing this glowing purple thing to the doctor. And I wish actually that I had maybe painted a little bit more brightness into the purple. Obviously, it's the only piece of purple in that image. And I think I probably could have... You could probably emphasize that just a little bit more, so that the fact that he's handing something is a little bit more apparent. You can also do that just by kind of extending the doctor's hand just a little bit towards BB-8 would really, I think, drive home that kind of gesture of BB-8 is giving something to the doctor. Because you could look at this and maybe if you didn't know the story behind it, you could assume that he's like scanning the doctor. So if the doctor's reaching, you know that it's to accept something. Just a thought. Again, these are all nitpickings and just my opinions. So take everything I say in all of these Paintover Fridays with a huge grain of salt. Salt. That was bad. But yeah, awesome work, bud. And thank you for submitting the image. Really enjoy this. We still have a decent amount of noodling. I do like to noodle. And I was working on this during a client call, as it turns out. If that client's listening, I apologize. But yeah, this one was a lot of fun. So here's where I start kind of playing with this idea. Like compositionally, I like the how that works. And then I think, do I start immediately? I start playing with the foreground again a little bit. Really just kind of trying to think through what else could we do to allow the right part of the image to connect with the foreground visually just a little bit more. Excuse me. Jake, what's going on, buddy? Good to see you. Oh, Jake, I'm glad you're liking the new music. I'm trying out the epidemic stuff, and you know, obviously, I have to find music I like on that. So I kind of have a playlist of kind of ambient some of it's lo-fi, some of it's more like this. I don't know. They don't really have the type of music I typically listen to on there, so I need to step a little bit outside of my comfort zone. But yes, we're gonna mix things up because every day we listen to the same album is a lot. Jay, if you are around and you are listening, I really think that you should put together like a 45-minute like lo-fi to work to track. Just saying, I think it would be awesome. I love your background tracks, and I think that would be really cool. So count a vote for that from me. Yeah, so I think I start messing with moving the people all together, and we lose the ambulance, but I don't know that it's a terrible thing. And I think you could probably fit him back in somewhere. Maybe not exactly where I put him. But trying, like when I look at this image, I kind of ignore the right half of it, which makes me think that doing something like what I'm doing here allows the viewer's eye to kind of wander throughout the entire frame. Javier, I totally agree. I think this image was great. I really like this one. Really like it. Oh, Milan, thank you. Jay, you hear that? We got a second from Milan about you making some like lo-fi hip hop background work to tracks. if you know you're looking to take on yet another thing to do in your busy schedule. And one thing that occurs to me now, because like BB-8's the hero of this, and because when you move it across to the side, you could probably actually center him in this image, right? And then leave the left side sparse and the right side somewhat busy with a hospital. I didn't think of that while I was painting this. But I feel like this would be one of those situations, having BB-8 like smack dead in the middle of the canvas would not be a bad thing. I think that's one of the situations where that would work, at least as a thought. So yeah, now we're moving the ambience over. I'm pretty mixed feelings about whether I like this or not, but just that idea. And that just about wraps this up, I do believe. Probably should have made that ambulance bigger. Such is life. Such is life. Can't get them all. Yeah, I like this one. Trying to think if I have anything else to say. I think that's about all I got for today. Kind of a easy day. I'm sorry that these paintings were a little bit rushed compared to what I wanted to do. Thanks to a whole bunch of client work at the moment. Just got busy. You guys know how it goes. But yeah, really dig this. So Jorge, again, thank you for submitting your image for me to paint on. I very much enjoyed the image itself, and I enjoyed painting over it. I can't do that with them. Yeah. And same, Leandro, really liked your idea here. I think you just need to continue to develop it. And Adam Tuback, really loved the story and feeling of this one. And my biggest suggestion would be just, more visual depth in this one. I see you didn't try to change the aspect ratio of this image, making the image vertical. Maybe you think this won't work. Which image are you talking about, Claudio, now that I'm flipping through things? I will let you know. By and large, it's kind of one of those things like the framework with which you're painting over. Like this one, I didn't change the aspect ratio at all, even though I did move twice. But even in like this one, I still move things down of the hospital. I think vertical would be like a very different story, right? And I feel like a change like that, unless I had a really compelling reason to suggest it, I don't think I would. But let's see here. Let's just clear that. Let's see what kind of vertical crop we get. I mean, yeah, you definitely lose the cinematic feeling. The main part of the story works here, but like you could do something like this. But I'm gonna agree with Milan here that like the wide frame gives it a very cinematic feel, even in the original. That I think worked for this because it gives it a different kind of space for the main characters to breathe than if we had done it vertical. I do think you could probably make this work vertically if you wanted to. But yeah, I think if it was my image, I don't think I would. I think I would be happy knowing that I can get like a cool Instagram story vertical crop for it. But that I think I would keep it widescreen. I like the cinematic feel of this one. It also has like I moved the greens towards blues a bit and kind of warmed the light just a smidge or a lot, depending on how you want to look at it. But this kind of like green and like cyan and orange or blue and yellowish orange is like a very cinematic grade as well. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for today. Kind of an easy day. I got a bunch of work to finish this afternoon. So I'm gonna get back to that shortly. I am gonna take this weekend off. You guys know which number this is. I can't actually see it, thanks to how YouTube has decided to portray these in a little edit window. But yeah, I think I'm gonna take this weekend off, and I'm gonna take weekends off moving forward so that I can kind of prep for these things a little bit and spend a bit more like time with the baby and the wife, and keep these things going without burning out and getting tired of them. So I'll be back on Monday with Patrick from Alt Shift, where I'm going to teach him some post-production over one of his images. I think we're going to do actually his Mac entry, Mac competition entry, which he had like these kids playing with like this nuclear bomb. It was kind of crazy. It was awesome. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I hope you guys join me then. And then we have some other things that we're kind of hammering down the dates on, and I'll let you guys know about that on Monday when it's all finalized. But I think next week is going to be a good week. I'm very excited for it. So I hope you all have a very wonderful, wonderful weekend. Thank you for hanging out and for all the comments. Again, if you want me to do a paint over of one of your images, just shoot me an email at mike@droki.com or find me through a social media somewhere, and I can fill you guys in that way. And we'll get to them again next Friday. I very much enjoy doing them. So thank you to everyone who submitted. Thank you to everyone who does submit. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Stay positive. Get some exercise however you can. And yeah, until that time, guys, have a good one. Awkward time. Pen. Boop. So we got 2. We got 1. And then I'm going to say cheers and